Welcome to ICU Primary Prepcast.
Hi, I'm Maddie.
Hi, I'm Swapnil, and today we are joined by our celebrity host, Dr. Mike Clifford from Melbourne. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much, Swapnil. Hi, Maddie.
Today we are going to continue with the same pattern that we discussed in last episode. So we're going to take a scenario, and this time the vivas are around the respiratory physiology and equipment. So, Mike, the scenario is 32-year-old gentleman who is admitted with hypoxic respiratory failure secondary to pneumonia, and you are at the ward round. So, over to you.
Okay, so we're looking at this bloke and we can see that he's being given oxygen. And one of the things that often comes up in the primary is tell us about the pharmacology of oxygen. It's not something we sort of think of as a drug, but it is. We prescribe it and we give it as a drug. So, Maddie, why don't you tell me about the pharmacology of oxygen?
Okay, so the pharmacology of oxygen can be thought of in terms of its pharmaceutics, pharmacokinetics, and pharmacodynamics. Oxygen is a colourless, odourless gas. It's present in the atmosphere at a concentration of around 21%, and it's got multiple indications, so used in the treatment of hypoxemia, carbon monoxide toxicity, in migraines, and to help in the reabsorption of pneumothoraces, and also at higher pressure in hyperbaric therapy. In terms of the pharmaceutics, it's a gas which is slightly denser and more viscous than air, and it's produced either by using an oxygen concentrator or via fractional distillation of atmospheric air. When we think about the pharmacokinetics...
Just on the pharmaceutics, Maddie, how do we store it?
So it's generally in tanks, so oxygen cylinders, and then they've got big cylinders in like vapor insulated evaporators or VIEs that in hospital systems then gets transported into cylinders and into our outlets.
Well, let's move on. Tell me about the pharmacokinetics.
So the pharmacokinetics, you can think of like any drug in terms of the administration, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So in terms of administration, we usually give it via variable intake devices, such as through nasal prongs, or via fixed delivery devices, such as when we intubate someone and through an endotracheal tube. And in hyperbaric, it's used externally at higher pressures. And normally, for a normal adult, we absorb oxygen at the rate of about 250 mils a minute at room air. In terms of the distribution, oxygen diffuses across the alveolar membrane and it enters the blood at a rate of diffusion dependent on Fick's law. So that depends on the concentration, partial pressure of oxygen within the blood, the surface area, which is the alveolar surface, and the thickness of the alveolar membrane. It's mainly transported in the blood by binding with hemoglobin, while a small amount is dissolved within blood. In terms of metabolism, it's metabolized.
So if someone asked you, or a candidate, what is the volume of distribution of oxygen, how would you answer that?
Well, I guess it's mainly dissolved within the bloodstream. So I guess you could use it by using the oxygen content equation. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it's like the volume of blood, so 5 litres approximately.
Okay, no, good. It's not an answer. It's not a question that's very easy to answer, but I think you're right. I mean, the first volume of distribution is the bloodstream, where it's mainly bound to hemoglobin, but obviously it ends up diffusing into all cells and then disappearing into the mitochondria. So its volume of distribution is much, much, much greater than total body water. But so there's two phases of its volume of distribution. You could answer either and sort of back up what you're saying. But it's a question that's come up in the primary vivas, and we often get blank looks on people's faces. So well done. Yeah, it's about the blood. It's the bloodstream. Well done.
Yeah, I can understand that blank look. I think I would have got a blank look if someone had asked me that.
Okay, go on. So metabolism?
So, yeah, in terms of metabolism, it's metabolized in all tissues. The main culprits being the brain, heart, and skeletal muscle. But it's metabolized everywhere via the cytochrome C mitochondrial enzymes during the process of oxidative phosphorylation. And the byproducts of this, mainly ATP, carbon dioxide, and water. And this metabolism follows zero-order clearance kinetics, and it's about at 200 mils a minute. Then in terms of the elimination, the carbon dioxide is transported back to the lungs and excreted by respiration, while water is eliminated by the kidneys. So in terms of pharmacodynamics, oxygen is required for oxidative phosphorylation, which produces ATP or energy that's needed for normal cellular function. But the things I think we don't think about as much is the adverse effects of oxygen, and hyperoxia itself can cause multiple adverse effects. So as a blanket adverse effect, hyperoxia can cause cellular injury, and this is due to the production of reactive oxygen species, which can result in inflammation, tissue injury, and cell death. And if we think about the different organs that this can have effects on, in terms of the respiratory system, Excess oxygen or hyperoxia can cause resorption atelectasis. It can cause oxidative damage to the alveoli itself, which is concentration and time dependent. So it's worth the higher the concentration and the longer the duration. It can cause pulmonary vasodilation, which can result in VQ mismatch in some circumstances. And in neonates, it can cause bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Other adverse effects include dry nose and mouth, and it can impair mucoxillary clearance. And it can worsen hypocapnia in CO2 retainers, so patients with severe COPD. In terms of the cardiovascular system, it can cause systemic vasoconstriction, and it reduces coronary blood flow, and this can be up 30%. It also can increase the infarct size in terms of acute myocardial infarct, which is why we don't generally give supplemental oxygen if the patient isn't hypoxic after an infarct. And it has been shown to increase the mortality post-cardiac arrest if the PaO2 is greater than 300 millimeters of mercury. From a neurological point of view, it can cause retinopathy in premature infants. It decreases the blood flow to the brain by up to 33%, and it has been associated with increased mortality in stroke and TBI. And from a hematological point of view, it can impair erythropoiesis if there's prolonged exposure.
Yeah, that's very good. And I think that it's interesting. When I first started out as an intern, you didn't get admitted to any hospital without being given 14 litres of oxygen. And it was just a standard. And if you had symptoms of coronary artery disease and ischemia, you got oxygen because it must be good for you. And it's interesting, since then, almost every trial that's looking at randomisation of oxygen versus no oxygen has showed that oxygen is not good for you. So it's something we pump into every patient, but increasingly the evidence would suggest that that's not a good thing to do, and reducing our oxygen targets is the way to go. So well done. And it's a lovely question to think of for the Vivas, is talking about oxygen as a drug. And we've asked it as an SAQ as well, because it's a great question.
Okay, so I think we'll go to the next part of the Viva, and this patient is intubated, and you notice that the FiO2 on the ventilator is set at 50%. Can you tell me how the ventilator measures and titrates this FiO2 that we set on it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Maddie, because even I didn't know different types of oxygen sensors that we use in ventilator. So there are different modern methods of dissolved oxygen measurement in ICU, and that they are performed by using the dissolved oxygen sensors, which are connected to a meter that records the calibration and hence measures the data and displays the number of percentage of oxygen. Now, there are two different types of dissolved oxygen sensors, electrochemical and optical. Electrochemical dissolved oxygen sensors, also known as amperometric or Clark type sensors, which are very similar to Clark electrodes that we use in ABG machine, which measure dissolved oxygen concentration on electrical current produced. There are two different types of electrochemical dissolved oxygen sensors. One is polarographic and galvanic. The advantage of galvanic sensors over polarographic sensors are that they don't require outside voltage source and warm-up time to operate, and their electrolytes can be used for a long time. And most modern ventilators use electrogalvanic oxygen sensors to measure the concentration of oxygen. Also, they give you the broad range of measurement of FiO2 percentage from 0% till 100%, while some of the polarographic sensors can measure only up to 50% oxygen concentration. Then there are optical dissolved oxygen sensors, popularly known as luminescent dissolved oxygen sensors, which are very expensive type of sensors. And they also measure dissolved oxygen concentration in water based on quenching of luminescence in the presence of oxygen. Now, coming back to the principle of galvanic medical oxygen sensors, which are known as electrogalvanic fuel cells, are the electrochemical devices used for analysis and monitoring of oxygen partial pressure in our ventilators, and also used in anesthesia machines. They are comprised of a cathode, an anode, a membrane, and an electrolyte solution. Oxygen molecules enter the cell through the membrane, and then they are reduced to hydroxyl ions at the cathode and then diffused through the electrolyte to be oxidized at the lead anode. So the anode which is used here is made up of lead, while the cathode is made up of silver. The cathode and anode are purposefully made up of dissimilar metals, which has got different electropotentials. Now, in order to reduce the oxygen without an external applied current or potential, the difference between anode and cathode has to be at least 0.5 volt. So when you place this anode and cathode in an electrolyte solution, the potential difference between these dissimilar metals causes them to self-polarize, with the electrons traveling internally from the anode to the cathode. And for this reason, the galvanic dissolved oxygen sensors does not require any warm-up time. So the reaction which happens inside is automatic.
What's the downside of a galvanic cell?
So the downside is the lifetime is limited.
Right.
And
Yep.
because the anode and cathode keep reducing on its own. And if we are giving the higher percentage of FiO2 to the patient,
okay. Good.
then the reactions are faster and then the lifetime is even shorter.
Good.
So the cathodic reaction is oxygen combines with water molecule plus electrons, and that leads to 4 hydroxyl ions. An anodic reaction where 2 lead molecule combines with these hydroxyl ions and then generates the 4 electrons. So the net cell reaction is 2 molecules of lead combined with oxygen leads to lead oxide. And these reactions then generate the current, which is directly proportional to the reduction of the oxygen at the cathode. And then the oxygen partial pressure, then linearity is maintained by the diffusion membrane, which limits the amount of oxygen seen by the cathode. The oxygen diffusion rate, important to remember that this is also temperature dependent, and output is controlled by the temperature compensation register, which is known as thermistor. And as I said, usually the lifespan at room air is usually quoted to be 4 years, but because we use at a higher FiO2 in ICU, sometimes 50%, 30%, 40%, the lifespan in ICU for these sensors is less than 6 months. So often these sensors need to be changed. So yeah, so that's the electrogalvanic sensor, which is very similar to Clark electrode.
Very similar.
Yeah, I got a trivia question for you guys. What is the another application of Clark electrode in ICU apart from measurement of oxygen in blood gas machine?
And not in the ventilator.
Not in the ventilator.
Clark electrode. Is it something to do with the fire alarm or measuring? No. Okay, you got us. What is it?
It's using the blood glucose measurement, BGL measurement. So that's principle is again Clark electrode. Yeah,
same.
So when principle. You put it, yeah, same principle. So when you put a drop of blood to measure the glucose in our all glucometers, that's actually the Clark electrode.
Very good.
Hard working.
This is the first question that I ask, and you guys can answer yes. So let's move on to the next one, Mike. So this is going to be very detailed, like a physiological question for you. Cool. So the registrar asks you, this patient is on 50% oxygen. How this oxygen reach all the way to the mitochondria?
Yep. Well, that's a great question. And I mean, this actually pretty much sums up intensive care, really. The oxygen delivery to the tissues, which is what we're all about. We aim to get oxygen into the bloodstream and then encourage the bloodstream to move around the body so that the oxygen can get to the mitochondria and the waste products can be moved out of the body. That is in intensive care in a nutshell. So what this is effectively asking is what is the oxygen flux, which is just another word for movement. And what we use to describe this is the oxygen flux equation, which is the cardiac output of the body, which is 5 litres a minute, multiplied by the oxygen content, which is usually 250 mils per litre, which is what Maddie told us before, which is actually a function of the hemoglobin concentration. So the formal equation is saturation multiplied by 1.34, which is Hafner's constant, multiplied by the concentration of hemoglobin, plus that amount of dissolved oxygen, which is usually 0.003 multiplied by the partial pressure of oxygen. Now, that depends on whether you're talking about deciliters or litres, but the PaO2 forms a very small component of the overall oxygen content of the blood. It's almost all bound to hemoglobin. And the amount that's bound to hemoglobin is a function of what sort of hemoglobin you've got. So the average is 1.34 times your hemoglobin concentration, but if you've got pure adult hemoglobin, it's 1.36. And the reason it's a variant amount is because some people have a little bit more carboxyhemoglobin or methemoglobin in their blood at any one time. So that's how much oxygen is actually in the blood that's sitting there. And then you've got to multiply it by the driving flux, which is the cardiac output. And in a 70 kilogram female at sea level, that's 5 litres per minute. So you get a total of 250 mils a minute of oxygen being pushed around the body. Now, as we've heard from the pharmaceutics and pharmacodynamics description, that all ends up going around to the mitochondria, where it's then metabolized and forms water and carbon dioxide. And the amount of carbon dioxide that then enters the capillary or venous blood is about 200 mils a minute. So it's slightly less. And the reason for that is because there's a function of your metabolism whereby the amount of CO2 produced is slightly less than the oxygen consumed, and that's your respiratory quotient. Now, if you've eaten a carbohydrate-rich diet, that number will get closer to 1. If you've got a mixed diet, it's closer to 0.8, which is what 200 over 250 is. So that's where all those numbers come from. That's why they are the numbers they are. It's because that's what physiology is. So that CO2 beautifully gets dissolved into the venous blood, and it increases your overall content from 48 mils to 52 mils of CO2, which is only a 4 mil difference because it's all dissolved and is mainly bicarbonate, but also bound to hemoglobin and a little bit of free dissolved. And that then moves back around at 5 litres a minute into the lungs, and then you breathe it off with your ventilation. So we've heard from Maddie about the pharmaceutics of the Fick equation affecting oxygen going from the alveolus into the bloodstream. Fick's equation comes into function again at the other end when oxygen has to go from the capillary into the mitochondria, and then Fick's equation again when the CO2 has to come out of the mitochondria and go into the blood, and then Fick's equation again when the CO2 goes across the alveolar membrane and breathes out through the alveolus. So you've got an enormous amount of physiology to talk about when you're simply asked about, tell us about oxygen delivery, because it's the delivery of a content of oxygen taking a cardiac output, and you could go down the pathway of what's cardiac output, stroke volume times heart rate. So you can go anywhere from this question. It's a wonderful opening question for Aviva, and you can end up talking about respiration, metabolism, mitochondrial function. You can talk about cardiac output and the variables associated with that, or you can be left languishing talking about oxygen pharmacology, and someone can ask you about how it's transported in a cylinder and what the pressures are, and you can end up having just a wonderful Viva. So that's why I look forward to giving this one.
Thanks, Mike. So that's, again, very detailed physiological answer on how the oxygen reaches to the level of mitochondria. And the question can be about oxygen cascade in the written or in a Viva form.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Maddie, I'm looking at you now because maybe have you got a joke for us?
I do. I've kind of phoned it in this week, but okay. This is a bit niche. It's for, I guess, Frozen fans out there. Okay, so why did Elsa refuse to see a doctor about her runny nose?
Mike is a pediatric intensivist.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling the heat here now because all of the songs, I live the songs at work. The only thing I can think of is because she didn't want to get locked in quarantine. But no, tell us why.
Because a cold never bothered her anyway.
Oh, that is fantastic. That is fantastic. Yeah, okay. That's really, really good, actually. I like that one.
I'm just keeping the scores now because I'm the umpire. So it's like now 2-1 Maddie's favor. So keep going, Maddie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks, Mike, and thanks, Maddie. So we'll be back with another 3 sets of Vivas in month's time. Till then, enjoy your freedom and go and have some fun outside.
Yeah, we are coming out of lockdown here in Victoria, so look out.
Good
We're
luck.
ready to go. Thanks very much.
See you next time.